Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be back at the Black Footwear Forum for the second time. I think this is a conversation, ladies, that can go many different ways, right? We can talk gender parity or inequality in fashion. We can talk entrepreneurship with Tracy. We can talk climbing the corporate ladder, racism, discriminate, all of it, and we will. But I want to ground us at first with a little bit of data. Not a lot of data, just some like surface level stuff here. So, women make up about 60% of the customer base in fashion. Some metrics put that number higher at 80%, right? They make about 40% of the garments that flow through the fashion system, right? So that's like, they're the textile workers, they're the seamstresses, they work at the factories. But when it comes to leadership, women occupy just 14% of those roles. Now, if I were trying to find a number for black women, guess what? It's so vanishingly small, it doesn't exist, okay? So the reason why I ground us in that data is because you sitting here today is a testament to overcoming something, right? Even if you don't feel like it, you've had to overcome a lot to be on this stage. So a round of applause for that, and the boots, and the boots. Okay? So, I want to start kind of at the beginning. Jamie, tell us about your first job. You've had a lot of jobs before you came at the helm of Jimmy Choo. What was your first job, and what do you remember about the experience?
Well, first of all, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here, and also I am pleased to share the stage with not only you, but also Tracy Reeves, so thank you. When I think about my first job, corporate job, it was at a Macy's Federated Department Stores, so I started out as an assistant buyer. And for me, I was the only one. Mm-hmm. And so, I think when we think about that, it's a lot of us that have experienced that in the past. And the way that I was able to overcome it, I really just was assertive. I asserted myself in departments. I asserted myself in meetings. I made sure that my voice was heard. But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, I wanted to make sure that my presence was there and my presence was not forgotten. So, I think that that's incredibly important for all of us, especially people of color.
You being an only, how many years ago was this?
20 years, 25 years ago.
I mean, by the way, that's still a reality. Like, that's not mistake. That 2 decades later, it's much different. There's a lot of us that are still the only in a room. Now, Tracy, you started your own brand. Did you always know you were going to take the entrepreneurial part, or did you kind of come upon it?
No, I didn't. It was actually my dad's idea. And I was happily working in another company. Well, not happily, but,
Why not happily? No, pause there. Why not happily? Was it in fashion?
No, it was just a company that had a lot of dysfunction. It was a fashion company,
surprising.
Small brand, and the kind of company where the controller would give us the heads up, like run to the bank and cash your check, kind of challenges. So, but it was a great company, and I learned a lot. But at one point, my dad said, "You need to do your own thing," and my dad worked at Chrysler here in Detroit all of his career. And I think he loved the idea that his children would have options. And he helped finance my first business. And I got loans, which was interesting because being taken seriously as a young black woman, I was like 23 at the time, is not easy. But I got a loan for women of color in business from the government. And of course, I owed it immediately the minute I got the check. But
what were those conversations like to get that loan?
Oh my God, I actually worked with a small business development center at Pace University in New York to create a business plan, and they really shepherded me through the process. It was a small loan; it was $30,000, but in 1987, that was a lot of money to me. So it was challenging, but I had help. And I think, one of the most important things that I can advise others is see what assistance there is wherever you are, whether it's at a local business school. The government has a lot of entrepreneurial support, and we need to learn how to take advantage of everything that's offered out there because others are, and we should not be left behind.
100%. I want to talk about mistakes in the early part of your journey. Start with you, Jamie. What was a mistake you made at the beginning of your career? and how did you navigate and come back from it? And sometimes those mistakes could be in like facing discrimination, how you respond to it. It could be, you know, applying for the wrong job as your first job. It could be anything. What was one of those mistakes?
I think not taking advantage of opportunities sooner. When I think about when I was at the Jones Group for 12 years, there were many roles where I was offered, and I was like, no, I don't think I'm ready. But I think it was also this moment of imposter syndrome that I was probably facing, and I think that I didn't think that I was ready for the roles, when in fact I think I was. Now, fast forward now, I look at it and I'm like, gosh, I should have taken that sooner, but I wouldn't change my journey. But I think it's about pausing on roles that I should have taken at a sooner time that I didn't act on, and I should have.
What does imposter syndrome feel like to you? It came up yesterday. A lot of people were talking about this experience of not feeling like you belong, but it manifests in different ways for different people. What did it feel like for you when you said, oh, I'm not worthy? Did you look at your credentials and line it up to like a job? How did that manifest?
I think it's about feeling like, not that you're not worthy, but are you right for this role? And I think what's important, especially now that I sit at a role and title of being president, it's about making sure that you really believe in yourself and not letting others sort of manifest this imposter syndrome that perhaps you feel. At the end of the day, it's about confidence. It's also about building these alliances and building allies where they can really champion you and your vision and your talent as well. But it's really about making sure that you believe in yourself and having that self-confidence.
I want to double click on that a little bit because there are a lot of students in the room when they're applying for their first job and then they do line their resume up against a job description. Do you have to do that? Like, do you have to have everything on the list from where you sit? Because you're hiring people, right? Does that expectation still exist, and how do you get around it if you have 8 out of the 10 skills or even 5 out of the 10 skills?
From my perspective, no. And when I took this role that I've been in for 4 years, the chairman had sort of handpicked me and selected me for this role, and he said, you are not going to know everything. Don't expect to know everything when you get in this role. Seek out others and alliances to help you form your path forward in terms of journey and leadership, but it is, you do not have to check all the boxes. I think what's most important is your passion. I think your ability to learn, your ability to take honest feedback, and your work ethic ultimately will help form your journey.
So Tracy, you dressed the First Lady. That's a moment in and of itself, Michelle Obama. But you're also in department stores like Nordstrom and Neiman Marcus and Bergdorf Goodman. So you're having conversations with buyers and executives. Do you feel like you're treated differently as a Black woman designer in those conversations? And do you have to bring something else to the table that you think your peers don't?
I think always, but at the same time, I think it's also something we put on ourselves.
More about that.
So much of my career, I was the only one in the room, or the only one in the department, or the only one in the store. And at the beginning of my businesses, I don't think a lot of buyers knew that I was Black. And at the time, it wasn't a bad thing. I mean, there was code for when they met me, oh, I thought you were from LA. I'd be like, I'm from Detroit. But at the time, it wasn't a bad thing. And I told the story yesterday when I launched Tracy Reese the second time, I'm on my third business. I had a Black salesperson, Tony Jones, and we were like, let's do this. We were in it. She was seasoned. She was well known. I was known, and we could not get arrested together. We could not get arrested. And the minute she bowed out and a white salesperson took over the brand, or selling the brand, it blew up. And that was so upsetting and disappointing for me, because it wasn't that the collection changed, the complexion changed. What people were seeing, too much Blackness at the time was not a good thing. 1 + 1 did not equal 2. And it was such a blow to understand, how people perceived us. And having a white salesperson made it okay to love the clothes. And all of a sudden we were in every store, we were in Japan, we were everywhere. And I think both salespeople were equally strong. I really do. And so, you know, at the time, and this was, you know, the 90s, that's just how the industry was functioning. And I could see people, you know, weighing if they wanted to invest in being business partners with me. When I went to LA to get LA representation, I saw every great rep in town. I had a list, you know, and each of them had an excuse of why they could not take the line until I found the one who became like my rep for like 20 years. And she just looked at me and she looked at the clothes and she was like, let's do this, you know, and she made a huge success of it on the West Coast. So you just have to power through, honestly. It does take a lot to believe in yourself. And I think for me, there was youth plus being a Black woman in a white space. And I really had to push myself a lot. I'm an introverted person. I had to let that go. And I had to represent myself and my brand and my dad's investment.
What do you do with a lesson like that, though? You hire a white salesperson, suddenly your revenues are through the roof. Do you take that and turn that into something in terms of who you hire next? How do you think about that? Because if you now know a Black salesperson is not going to be able to move your merchandise, pause at how sad that is. It's so sad. But what do you take forward from that in terms of how you hire people or staff your stores? Do you just power through that?
It was all about balance. I mean, I remember, you know, look, a Black man couldn't get a taxi in New York for years. I would be on the street with Gordon Henderson. It'd be like, you stand on that corner, I'll stand on this other corner with our friend Brenda, who's white, and Brenda will hail the cab. You know, so we would balance it out. Within our company, we had every race. We had Indian, we had Asian, and Chinese. We had Black. We had everybody. And it was about balance. Making sure that we were giving everybody an equal opportunity within the brand. But on the forefront, it took like another 10 years for us to get a Black salesperson on our team. It took 10 years. And again, somebody who was really well known, but she'd always been surrounded by white peers. In all the spaces that she was in, you know, and I was like, we have to hire this woman. She's incredible, and I really want her on our team. But it took a long time. I mean, that like, you know, kind of size 2 blonde salesperson is just like, you know, I just came from New York. I was at Market, but it's real. You know, they try on the clothes. All of a sudden, it's sold. And I was at Market this week, and you know, we have an Atlanta team, and they throw down. You know, but I am in our booth, and I'm, you know, meeting, greeting people, and times have changed a lot. So many people are happy to see me, and all my Southern stores come in, and it's like, you know, we remember when we had your line back in blah, 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 and I'm so happy to see you again and support the brand. So that has changed, I think, for the better, but you know, it does require balance in all things, and I'm proud of who I am. I've never been, you know, upset to be a Black woman. I think I have an edge because my desire is greater. My ability to work for it, find solutions, push through, find an open window somewhere, I feel is greater.
It's not.
I would actually double back on that too, because I think when Tracy talks a lot about balance, I think gender bias is something that can manifest itself subtly, right, in our environments, and it could be a matter of being overlooked in terms of our ideas, or it could be talked over in meetings, perhaps. But I think, you know, one thing about balance, but I think also representation is key, and I think being the first Black woman being the president of Jimmy Choo, it's all about the representation and the influence that I can have on the teams and the staff and how I'm building the culture is incredibly important, because if you don't have that representation at the top, it cannot cascade down unless you have the allies to support you. So, you know, from my perspective, balance is definitely important, but representation is also incredibly key in terms of success of diverse teams.
I want to talk a little bit about what that representation looks like in real time. You're an only. Sometimes having a seat at the table means have a seat and sit in your place, right? Like, don't get it twisted. People get very excited about a seat, right? Yeah. How do you actually make sure that that seat does something for people behind you? What does that look like on a day-to-day?
I think being resilience, and Tracy touched on this a little bit, but you know, you've got to keep going. There's got to be resilience attached to it. You have got to be persistent. I think, you know, presenting ideas, but being intentional and also being confident in the ideas that you're presenting, and making sure that you have facts and you have results to back them up, so that you can have people come along and really believe in your idea and your vision and your talent. You can't just speak, you have to have the facts to back it up. But I am incredibly, I believe so much in having these allies and people across the table that also believe in you, forming these alliances so that your ideas and your thoughts can actually really reverberate within these rooms and also amplify your vision. So for me, it's being present, it's being consistent, but also being able to influence, whether that's from a mentorship perspective, whether that's building diverse teams, and also making sure that you really are driving change and inspiring at the same time.
Absolutely. So proof of concept. You're basically proof of concept for other Black women. Like, Black women can lead a brand. Hello.
Yeah.
Your work at the CFDA, Tracy, you're doing some of this diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff. I missed the talk yesterday about the unstate of DEI. So just to remind people, a lot of the diversity and equity and inclusion programs that were hastily designed out of 2020 are, no surprise, being wound down quietly. You have a role at the CFDA that isn't explicitly about DE&I, but you're doing that. How are you doing that? And is that pressure to show up at the role you're paid to do, but also you have to do other things to leave the door open behind you? Does that feel unfair?
It's interesting. I mean, CFDA is a very interesting organization.
How so?
Been in so many. I've been on the board for probably 10 years, and when Diane von Furstenberg invited me to be on the board, I was like, okay. But for a while, you know, I was the only one, of course, on the board, and I would listen a lot. And I'm a listener. I'm not a big. I don't have to be front and center all the time. But when I would speak, she would really listen. And she used to call me the conscience of the board, because that board just goes way to the left sometimes, and you're sitting there like, what are we doing? But
off the record.
When Tom Ford became chair, it was at the height of, you know, the George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, everything, and he was determined to shift things, and he asked me to be his vice chair. He brought in Beth Ann Hardison, he brought in Carly Cushney, so there were more Black voices on the board, which is great. He really pushed to diversify the board, but then it was really challenging to maintain momentum. We developed a program called Impact, which was to bring awareness to all of the incredible Black creatives in our industry and make sure that their work was seen, make sure that there was support for these creatives. But then it got entangled in so much bureaucracy that it was really, you know, kind of challenging. It has its own funding. It has to, you know, funding for Impact has to be raised separately. Yeah. They just launched a great program with Tiffany this year for jewelry design, which is awesome, and a lot of great work has been done through Impact. But I see the desire to make sure that Impact survives as a top platform for the organization. I see that waning, you know, and it's really scary, and it's something that, you know, we have a little side Black advisory board that we discuss
it's always
all the
on
time.
The side.
Like, how do we keep this front
right
and
here.
center? How do we keep the heat on? Because, you know, other things pop up that could be seen as equally important, but the membership of CFDA, the Black membership of CFDA, in 2020 was about 2%, you know? And there were programs to bring in emerging designers, because there's so many hoops to jump through to become a member. But I also find that, you know, designers today, emerging designers, new brands, they don't feel like it's a necessity. They don't need to be a member of CFDA. It's like, well, what are they doing for me? So there is a lot of incredible programming. So I do urge people to take advantage of the programming that is there for free for members. But I still have to advocate, because everyone can't afford the dues of membership. That's a hurdle.
How much are the dues?
It starts at $1,000. It goes up to like 10,000 or 15,000, depending on the size of your brand and what your revenues are. So they have a sliding scale, which is helpful, but they had like an entry-level scale for emerging designers, and that was, I think, super important. And they're in talks to sort of do away with that entry-level scale. And I'm like, what happened to DE&I? You know, what happens? How do we bring new energy and new life into this organization?
Absolutely. From where you sit on the DE&I front, how have you seen things shift in the last few years? Tracy makes a good point around, you know, a lot of companies, and maybe some of you work at them, put DE&I in the social impact bucket, which means it's a nice to have. And DE&I really is like a business imperative. And when you put it there, it means like, if anything goes wrong financially, we can't do this because it's just our little cute thing to do on the side. From where you sit, have you seen, how have you seen the evolution of that?
Certainly it has ramped up, I would say, within the last 4 to 5 years within Capri Holdings. So Jimmy Choo sits in with the parent holding company of Capri Holdings. So it is something that has ramped up over the time. There is still progression. I think me being there, especially within a senior executive role, continues to allow them to put it as a talking point. It does sit within our CSR, our corporate social responsibility bucket, but there is a dedicated team within Capri that we've utilized to build out ERGs across all of the regions, across all of the brands, and they also ensure that on a monthly basis, the key stakeholder for DE&I is having a one-on-one with me every single month to give me updates on where do we stand from an employee standpoint, what does the Black population look like within all of our brands, not only employees, but also at that leadership level, which is where we are probably not consistent with where we should be within when you compare us to other populations. So it's going to continue to grow and grow, but me being there to be a voice, to advocate, as Tracy had talked about, that is incredibly important to keep the progress going with DE&I.
Absolutely. I want to pivot a little bit to mentorship. I was at some of the sessions yesterday, and mentorship was a huge part of the conversation. It's important to everyone in this room at every level of your career. I'll set you up with this prompt. I have a love-hate relationship with mentorship, right? I think that, I think it's often overstated, and the way it's presented to people is that you should find the most successful person, this came up yesterday, in the company that's or in the industry that can be your North Star and like let them guide you. I think that it's why I hate it, the hate part of it is that I think it's an uncomfortable process for both people, right? Like the person that's in the ivory tower that has all the answers, that's a lot of pressure because often they can't help you as much as you might expect. And then when you're the aspiring talent, it's a lot of pressure to try to guide a relationship or build a relationship with someone that you think is so much more important than you. They have all the answers, I don't. When I send the email, every comma has to be correct because otherwise they'll think I'm stupid. I think that's not a very fair dynamic. It's incongruent. So I don't love that. I prefer peer-to-peer. What's your take on mentorship? Do you mentor people? Do you have a mentor?
I agree with you. It's an interesting, I think we all have had mentors in our career, but they didn't have the title of mentor. Mm-hmm. And I think when you kind of make it this really, concrete thing, a lot of baggage comes with it. I've had people decide that I would be their mentor and just would ask me for answers and pathways and introductions, and I'm thinking, okay, I would love to be of service, but part of achieving is finding your path and doing your research and building your relationships. Okay, so if someone just hands it to you, then you don't have the experience of earning it and creating it for yourself. Can you recreate it once someone is not handing it to you? So the desire to find your own path, because your journey should be so much different than mine. You know, I started my journey, 4 decades ago. Your journey is going to be completely different. We're in a different world. So I can share my experience with you for sure. And if there are people that I think you should know, I would love to connect you. But I want to see you creating your own path, and walking your own path. That's important. And there's a lot, I feel like it's a reciprocal relationship because, like I said, my journey started 4 decades ago. I'm curious with anyone I'm mentoring right now, what are you doing today that is so different than what I did? Maybe you can teach me something about how to build a customer base through socials or whatever. These are skills that I don't have. So I think it should be a reciprocal relationship. Each person should have something to bring to the relationship. That's really important. And we each feel valued. We feel like our time is worthwhile. And, because I've met some wonderful people through the experience of mentoring, but it has to be a two-way street.
Absolutely. So we're clapping for that. So great, not a carbon copy of your mentor. Make sure it's mutual. What would you add to that, Jamie? Do you have a mentor still?
I do. I mean, I've had several over the years. I think, the one thing that I learned from one mentor was don't try to fit into the mold. They just need to adapt and adjust to you. And so for me, I've utilized that to navigate spaces where I had to navigate that there was not leadership or there was not people that looked like me. For me, mentorship is important. I agree. It is essentially a two-way street. I really believe in also reverse mentoring. I have 2 teenage young adult daughters, 19 and 22, and I oftentimes tap into them to understand what's happening socially and digitally, and I learn a lot from them. But for me, mentorship and mentoring has been the blueprint for how I lead, but also how I'm creating and breaking these barriers within these spaces. And now I use it as a way to really give back and to also allow young leaders in the next generation on how to take their path forward within this industry, but specifically within the fashion industry.
Absolutely. So we have 2 minutes left. I want to ask each of you one piece of advice, the most important piece of advice you would give to other women in this industry or trying to break in that are feeling tired. I mean, a lot of what we just described is sad, is frustrating, you've overcome a lot, but maybe they're feeling that right now. How do they overcome and stay the course? One piece of advice you would give. You can reflect. Reflect for a few seconds, because I want it to be your best, most impactful thing. I don't know if I'm going to ask Tracy, actually. You're thinking, oh, I'm scared.
Listen, I think for me, it's simple. It's really having this level of persistence and being present. I say it oftentimes, and it feels repetitive, but to me, you have to stay present and you have to put yourself in the right spaces and not give up. I just feel like being present is really important and being resilient.
I would say always remembering why you're in it in the first place, and hopefully it's for the love of what you do. That's going to pull you through time after time. If you love what you do, you find ways to do it, and you find a community to do it with. And I think if you're in it for any other reason than for the love of it, it's really going to be a hard drop, because when things don't go as you would like for them to go, which is so often, where do you turn? Where do you turn if you don't love it enough to find another way to continue to do it? So it's important. We have to reflect on our own careers, on where we are. Sometimes, you know, our careers, the journey takes us off course. You know, that's why I started a third business, because it's like, wait a minute, I'm not loving it, and that's on me. You know, so I have to make sure that I'm loving what I do. That's when I can do my best work and feel the most proud of what I'm achieving. So do it because you love it. If you don't love it, do something else. We're free people, right?
We're free
And
people, yeah.
we have ingenuity, resilience, all of those good things. So find the love.
Love that. I think we can end it there. Do what you love, be resilient, be present. Thank you so much. We don't have time for questions. I got the hard, so we don't have time for questions. Thank you so much. Thank you guys.